The observation deck of the Sovereign's Eye held silence like a blade holds an edge. Queen Thessera of the Valkyr Empire stood motionless before the reinforced viewport, her forearms crossed in the formal stance of contemplation, watching the human diplomatic vessel drift closer through the void. Her scales, deepest crimson marked with gold, caught the starlight in ways that made her guards uncomfortable. They had seen that particular shade of gold only once before, during the purge of the Outer Rim, when she had ordered 12 inhabited systems sterilized for refusing tribute. "Your Radiance," Guard Captain Vralek said, his voice modulated to the exact pitch of deference required. "The human ship is requesting docking permission." "How many aboard?" Scan indicates 47 life signs, predominantly adults. 3 juveniles. Now she turned and Vralek felt his secondary heart skip. Juveniles? They brought their young to a first contact negotiation? It appears so, Your Radiance. For 300 cycles, the Valkyrie had expanded unchallenged. Their warriors were bred in gravity 3 times standard, their weapons drew power from collapsing microsingularities, and their fleet could crack a planet's crust from orbit. 17 species paid tribute. 4 had been eradicated. The galaxy had learned to fear the Crimson ships. Then humanity had appeared at the fringe. Claiming 17 systems, the Valkyr had marked for expansion. The humans had politely declined the demand to withdraw. They had politely declined the second demand, delivered with a demonstration that turned an uninhabited moon to dust. They had sent instead an invitation to discuss terms. As if they had any position from which to negotiate. Thasser's intelligence network had compiled everything available about humans, a species barely 2 centuries into void travel, fractious, divided into hundreds of political entities, possessing weapons that were primitive by Valkyr standards. Their largest vessels massed 1/10 of a Valkyr dreadnought. Their armor could be penetrated by standard plasma rifles. They had no natural weapons, no enhanced strength, no redundant organs. They were, by every measurable standard, prey, yet they had not fled. "Grant them docking," Thessara said, "but I want shock troops on every approach corridor. If they make any aggressive movement, I want them vented to vacuum before they draw breath. It shall be done, Your Radiance." She watched the human ship grow larger in the viewport. It was ugly, all angles and exposed superstructure, like something assembled by a species that had never considered aesthetics. The hull was scarred, patched in places. These humans fought among themselves, her intelligence suggested, constantly. They had unified for this venture only because the Valkyr expansion threatened them all. Unity born of fear. She understood that. She had built an empire on it. The docking clamps engaged with a shudder that transmitted through the deck. Thessara moved to the reception hall, her honor guard forming around her with practiced precision. 60 warriors, each capable of tearing through a bulkhead with bare claws, each armed with weapons that could reduce flesh to constituent atoms. They lined the corridor in perfect ranks, still as statues, silent as death. The airlock cycled. The door opened. The human who stepped through first wore no armor. A simple dark suit, some kind of formal wear. Male Thessera's briefing suggested, though the dimorphism was subtle. His skin was pale, his hair dark and short. He moved with calm deliberation, hands visible and empty, stopping precisely at the designated greeting mark on the deck. "Your Radiance," he said, his voice clear despite speaking through a translator implant. "I am Ambassador Chen. On behalf of the United Terran delegations, I thank you for receiving us." Behind him came others, more humans in similar attire, most carrying data slates or recording equipment. 2 wore military uniforms but no visible weapons, and at the back, holding the hands of 2 adults, 3 small humans. Children, Thessara felt her gill slits flare in surprise before she controlled the reaction. The 3 young ones were staring at everything with wide eyes. One appeared perhaps 8 cycles old, one younger, one barely past infancy, carried in an adult's arms. They looked fragile, vulnerable. Prey species young always did. "You bring juveniles to a military negotiation?" Thessara asked, her voice carrying the harmonics of disbelief. Ambassador Chen's expression shifted, a small movement of facial muscles that her briefing identified as a smile, though this one carried sadness. "Our ship departed Earth 4 months ago, Your Radiance. We couldn't know the journey would take us directly to this confrontation. These are the children of our crew. We don't leave family behind for years at a time. It's not our way. You are in Valkyr space, facing the possibility of obliteration." "Yes," Chen said simply, "which is why we hope to negotiate peace." The smallest child made a sound, not words, some kind of vocalization. the adult holding it adjusted position, murmuring something too quiet for the translator to catch. The action was unconscious, protective, automatic. Thesara's tactical implant highlighted threat assessments, weapons ranges, kill zones. Every Valkyrie warrior in the corridor could see the same data. 47 soft-skinned beings, 3 of them unable to defend themselves, standing in a corridor that could become a coffin at her signal. But something made her pause. Some instinct honed by 300 cycles of war and conquest whispered a warning she couldn't quite articulate. "Very well," she said. "We will hear your terms. But understand, Ambassador Chen, that bringing your young here will not sway Valkyr resolve. We do not respond to manipulations of sentiment." "I understand, Your Radiance," Chen replied. "But with respect, their presence isn't manipulation. It's simply who we are." Thesera gestured toward the conference chamber. The honor guard remained at attention as the humans filed past. She watched each one, analyzing gaits and expressions, searching for the threat her instincts insisted existed, but there was nothing. Just prey species delegates walking into a predator's den, knowing exactly what they faced, bringing their most vulnerable with them because, what? Principle? Stupidity? The 8-cycle-old child looked directly at her as he passed, meeting her eyes without fear. Not challenge, not submission, just curiosity. For the first time in 300 cycles, Queen Thesara of the Valkyr Empire felt uncertain. The conference chamber had been prepared for intimidation. High ceiling, sparse furniture, lighting that cast Valkyr features in dramatic relief while leaving humans partially shadowed. Thesara took her position at the head of the table, her forearms arranged in the posture of absolute authority. Her advisors flanked her. Military Coordinator Jask, Intelligence Director Mora, and Economic Minister Threx, each represented a pillar of Valkyr power. The humans arranged themselves along the opposite side. The children were seated at the far end with 2 adults who appeared to be designated caregivers. The 8-cycle-old had a data slate, the younger one some kind of toy. The infant seemed content in its caregiver's arms. Ambassador Chen opened with formalities, acknowledging Valkyr supremacy in the region, recognizing their military superiority, expressing hope for peaceful resolution. Standard diplomatic noise. Thesara let him speak while studying the humans more carefully. They were nervous. She could see it in small movements. A finger tapping against a data slate, a shift of weight, a quick glance between 2 delegates. Good. Fear was appropriate. Fear was the foundation of negotiation. The 17 systems in dispute, Chen continued, represent strategic importance to both our peoples. They contain resources, habitable worlds, and position. We understand the Valkyr Empire's interest. However, these systems also lie along established Terran trade routes and contain 6 colonies with a combined population of 43 million human citizens. Jask interjected, his growl carrying clear threat. "The colonies were founded 70 years ago, Coordinator," Chen replied calmly, "before any Valkyr vessel had been detected in the region. The space is claimed now, which is why we're here. To find accommodation that respects both our positions." "There is no accommodation," Thesara said, letting her voice drop to the register that preceded violence. "There is only Valkanor law. Withdraw your colonies, recognize our sovereignty, and pay tribute as all species must. Or face obliteration." The humans exchanged glances. Several looked pale. The military officers remained expressionless, but Thesara saw their jaws tighten. Fear and anger, barely controlled, exactly as expected. "Your Radiance," Chen said carefully, "we cannot abandon 43 million citizens. I don't believe the Valkyr Empire would accept such terms if our positions were reversed. Our positions could never be reversed. You are weak. We are strong. This is the natural order." At the far end of the table, the 8-cycle-old child spoke to his caregiver, voice carrying in the chamber's acoustics. "I'm hungry. When can we eat?" "Lucas, we talked about this. The adults are in a very important meeting." "You need to wait. But I'm really hungry. You said we'd eat after we docked." The infant, perhaps responding to the other child's voice, began making distressed sounds. The caregiver holding it stood, swaying gently, murmuring soothing nonsense. Several human delegates glanced back, expressions mixing irritation and concern. Ambassador Chen maintained his composure. "My apologies, Your Radiance. Children have difficulty with long formal proceedings. Perhaps we could—" "Control your offspring or remove them," Thesera said coldly.
The caregiver stood, gathering the children.
Come on, Lucas. Let's go to the waiting area. But I want to see the aliens, Lucas protested, even as he was gently but firmly guided toward the exit. They look cool. Why do they have 4 arms? Is it like spiders? Do they have more hearts? Can I ask? Bringing children had been a calculated move, clearly. An attempt to make the Valkyrie see humans as sympathetic, to provoke protective instincts that might undermine ruthless negotiation. It was transparent, crude, and utterly ineffective. Now, she said, returning focus to Chen, shall we discuss reality? Your colonies will be evacuated. Your species will withdraw beyond the designated boundary we transmit to you. You will pay reparations for the resources you've extracted from Valkyr space. These terms are not negotiable. And if we refuse, Chen asked quietly, then we demonstrate what happens to species who challenge the Valkyr Empire. The silence that followed held weight. Thesara watched Chen's face, reading the micro-expressions her intelligence training had taught her to interpret. Fear. Determination. And something else. Something that looked almost like pity. Your radiance, Chen said finally. May I speak frankly? Whether I permit frankness depends on what you say. We've studied the Valkyr Empire extensively, your expansion over 300 cycles, the 17 species under your dominion, the 4 you exterminated. Your military doctrine, your economic systems, your social hierarchy, you've built something formidable. Acknowledgement of reality is wise. But we've also studied something else, the pattern of your conquests. Every species you've subjugated or destroyed, they all made the same choice when facing your ultimatums. They either submitted immediately or fought individually, refusing to coordinate because they couldn't overcome their own divisions. Thesara's scales rippled with interest despite herself. And humans are different? We're the most fractious, argumentative, divided species in our region of space. We fight among ourselves constantly. We have hundreds of separate governments, thousands of different cultures, millions of disagreements on fundamental values. By every logical measure, we should be the easiest species you've ever faced. Yet here you are, united under threat. Because that's what humans do. We fight each other right up until someone threatens all of us. Then we remember something that transcends our divisions, which is that our children, all our children from every nation and culture, deserve a future, and we will endure any sacrifice to protect that. Before Thesara could respond, the conference room door opened again. The caregiver from before stood there, face apologetic. Ambassador Chen, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Lucas keeps asking questions and he's... She noticed Thesara's focus on her, and faltered. I apologize, Your Radiance. I'll take him to the ship. What does the juvenile want? Thesara heard herself ask. The caregiver blinked in surprise. He has questions about the Valkyr, about your species. He saw images in the briefing materials, and he's very curious. I've tried explaining that this isn't the time, but he's 8 and persistent, and... Chen's eyebrows rose. The caregiver looked uncertain. Your Radiance? Mora asked carefully. I wish to understand what makes this species believe they can challenge us. Perhaps their juvenile can illuminate what their ambassador cannot. It was impulse, which Thesara distrusted, but something about this entire situation felt wrong, felt different from every conquest that had come before, and she had survived 300 cycles by trusting her instincts even when they contradicted logic. The caregiver retreated. A moment later, Lucas entered. He walked with the unself-conscious confidence of a child who had never faced real predators, stopping a respectful distance from the table and looking up at Thesara with open fascination. Hi, he said. You're the queen, right? You're really tall, and your scales are so shiny. Are they heavy? Do you have to polish them? My friend has a pet lizard, and we have to help it shed sometimes. Is it like that? The questions tumbled out in rapid succession, entirely without fear. Thesara found herself cataloging details. The child's height barely reached her thorax. His mass would barely register on a gravity scale. His limbs looked fragile enough to snap in her smallest hand. Yet he stood there asking about scale maintenance with the same tone one might use to discuss weather. Lucas, Chen said firmly, you need to be respectful. Address her Radiance properly. Sorry, your Radiance? Can I ask about your scales? Thesara felt the absurdity of the situation wash over her. The most powerful being in 17 systems, being questioned about personal grooming by a prey species juvenile in the middle of negotiating that species' potential extinction. They are keratin composite, reinforced with metallized proteins, she heard herself say. They require no maintenance. They are grown, not polished. Lucas's face lit up, another expression her briefing identified as joy. That's so cool. So you're like armored all the time? Do you ever take them off? Can you feel through them? When I touch stuff, my skin tells my brain about it. Is it the same? But Thessara raised one hand in a gesture that silenced the ambassador. She studied the child, this small, fragile being who should be cowering but instead wanted to know about sensory perception in keratin scales. I can feel pressure and temperature through them, she said. They have nerve endings at the base. Wow. So if I touched them, you'd know? Yes. Can I? Lucas. The caregiver moved forward, horrified. You absolutely cannot. She extended her smallest hand, lowering it to the child's level. You may touch. Gently. Lucas reached out with the same cautious reverence she'd seen scientists use when handling priceless artifacts. His small hand made contact with her palm scales, fingers tracing the patterns, expression wonderstruck. They're warm, he said, surprised. I thought they'd be cold, like a lizard, and they're really smooth. Does everyone in your species have red and gold, or are there other colors? Mine indicates royal lineage. Like how Ambassador Chen wears the dark suit for important meetings? My mom says wearing the right clothes helps people know you're serious. The comparison between genetically determined royal markers and clothing choices was absurd, but there was something in the child's reasoning, this attempt to find common ground, to connect the alien to the familiar, that made Thessara pause. Your species brings juveniles on starships, she said, into danger. Lucas pulled his hand back, looking thoughtful. We're not in danger on the ship. Captain Reeves says the Darwin has the best shields in the fleet, and Dad says families should stay together when they can. He didn't want to leave me and Emma and baby Tyler back on Earth for years and years. Mom's a hydroponics engineer and Dad's a xenobotanist, so they both needed to come on the expedition. So we all came, even knowing you might encounter hostile species. Well, Captain Reeves said we'd try really hard not to make anyone hostile. And Ambassador Chen is really good at talking to people and solving problems. He helped stop the Mars Independence War without anyone having to fight. Mom says sometimes talking is braver than fighting. Thessara felt the condescension rise and then falter, because this child stood in a Valkyr warship surrounded by warriors who could end his life without effort, and he spoke about bravery and talking and finding common ground. Not because he was naive, but because the adults around him had chosen to teach him that approach, had chosen to bring him here, into the Predator's den, and trust that talking could work. Are you hungry now? Thessara asked abruptly. Lucas nodded enthusiastically. Yeah. We were supposed to have lunch, but then the docking took longer than expected and there's been a lot of waiting. I'm not supposed to complain, though. Mom says important work takes time. Bring food suitable for omnivorous juvenile consumption. And something for the adults. Your radiance? Vralix looked uncertain. Thessara returned her attention to Lucas. While we wait, perhaps you can explain something. Your species fights among itself constantly, yet you claim unity against external threat. How do you resolve this contradiction? Lucas scrunched his face in thought, an expression of concentration. I think... Okay, so me and Emma fight a lot. Like, a lot. She takes my stuff and messes up my models, and sometimes she's really annoying. But when we visited Ganymede Station last year, these older kids were being mean to her. They said Earth kids didn't belong in the outer colonies. And I got really mad because Emma's my sister. She can be annoying and I can be mad at her, but nobody else gets to be mean to her. So I told them to stop, and when they didn't, I kind of pushed one of them. Dad was mad about that, but he also said he understood why I did it. The child's face showed embarrassment at the memory, but also something else. Pride. Protection. The same instinct that made Thessara's royal guards stand ready to die for her, expressed in miniature. So when someone threatens all humans, Lucas continued, even if we're fighting with each other, it's like they're still our family. All of us. And you protect family. Out of the mouths of juveniles, Thessara thought. This simple explanation that cut through political complexity to fundamental truth. Humans fought among themselves but unified against external threats, not through calculation or strategy, but through instinct. Through the same protective drive that made prey species parents suicidal in defense of their young. The guard returned with food containers. Thessara noted they'd brought standard protein rations unsuitable for humans. She was about to correct this when Lucas peered at the containers with interest. What's that? He asked. Compressed protein supplement. Manufactured nutrition. Can I try it? The caregiver looked alarmed. Lucas, that's probably formulated for Valkyr biology. It might not be safe. Do your emergency rations contain allergens fatal to Valkyr? Thesara asked. No, Your Radiance. They're designed to be digestible by most carbon-based life forms. The taste might be unpleasant, but they're not toxic. Lucas already had a container open, examining the dense bar inside. He broke off a small piece and put it in his mouth. His face underwent a series of expressions: surprise, consideration, acceptance. It's not bad, he declared. Kind of like the Nutri-Bars Mom makes me eat before school. Can I have more? Lucas, you were saying you're hungry? The caregiver protested. This isn't real food. It's okay. I've had worse. Remember the synthesized vegetables on Titan Station? Those were gross. He ate with the pragmatic efficiency of a child who'd grown up on starships where food was functional first and pleasant second. Around the table, other humans accepted rations as the guards distributed them. Ambassador Chen took one, examined it briefly, and began eating without complaint. This, Thesara realized, was the message the humans were sending. Not through words, but through action. We can adapt. We can survive. We can eat your food, walk your corridors, exist in your spaces. We're not fragile in the ways you assume. Ambassador Chen, she said slowly, you mentioned humanity's divisions. Yet you bring a unified delegation. How was this achieved? Chen swallowed his bite of ration bar before responding. With great difficulty, Your Radiance. 17 separate governments with different interests, cultures, and priorities. It took months of negotiation just to agree on the delegation's composition. There were arguments, compromises, and more than a few angry exchanges. Yet you succeeded because the alternative was facing the Valkyr Empire divided. And we've learned, through our own bloody history, what happens when we let our conflicts blind us to external threats. We've made that mistake before. Millions died because we were too busy fighting each other to see the real danger. And you believe this unity will save you now? I believe it gives us a chance. Your empire has never faced a truly unified species before. Every conquest in your history involved either immediate submission or disorganized resistance. You don't know how to fight an enemy that can coordinate across hundreds of governments, that will share resources despite historical conflicts, that will defend each other's colonies as if they were their own. A species that could unify its fractious nature into coordinated defense would indeed pose challenges the Valkyr hadn't encountered, but they were still weak individually, still vulnerable. You cannot defeat us militarily, she stated with certainty. Probably not in direct confrontation, Chen agreed, but war isn't only about military strength. It's about will, resources, and cost. You can destroy human colonies, but we'll evacuate who we can and scatter to rebuild elsewhere. You can occupy our worlds, but we'll make that occupation costly in ways that drain your empire. We'll fight with every tool we have, not because we can win, but because we must. Because that's what protecting our children requires. Asymmetric warfare, desperation tactics of the weak. Yes, all of that, for as long as it takes. Generations, if necessary. Lucas had finished his ration bar and was looking between the adults, trying to follow the conversation. When he caught Thesara's eye, he offered that same unself-conscious smile. This is about whether we're going to fight, isn't it? He asked. Like, a real war? The adults froze. Chen started to speak, but Thesara held up a hand to stop him. Yes, juvenile. It is. War is bad. That's what everyone says. Lots of people die, and cities get destroyed, and it makes everyone sad for a really long time. My teacher showed us history vids about Earth's wars. They were awful. Your history is written in conflict. Yeah, we're really good at hurting each other. But Dad says that's not something to be proud of. He says the best thing about humans isn't that we can fight. It's that we can stop fighting and work together when we have to, like building the space stations, or terraforming Mars, or doing the big science projects that take hundreds of years. We're better at building than destroying, even if we forget sometimes. The child's words hung in the air. Thesara found herself thinking about the Valkyr Empire's history. 300 cycles of conquest. Species subjugated or exterminated. Resources extracted. Territories claimed. All the metrics of successful expansion. But what had they built? What had they created beyond weapons and warships? The thought was uncomfortable, almost treasonous. Strength was what mattered. Power, dominance. These were the pillars of Valkyr's civilization. But looking at this human child, so small and fragile, speaking about building rather than destroying with the casual conviction of someone who'd never questioned which was more important. Thessara felt something shift in her understanding. "Guard Captain Vralix," she said suddenly, "what is your assessment of human military capability?" Vralix straightened, his response immediate and professional. "Based on intelligence analysis, your Radiants, their vessels, are inferior in firepower, armor, and maneuverability. Their ground forces lack our physical advantages. Their weapons technology is approximately 200 cycles behind our current standard. In a direct confrontation, we estimate 97% victory probability within 48 standard hours of engagement. Suppressing resistance across 17 systems while maintaining our existing borders and tribute collection." The question made Vralix pause. Thessara saw him calculate, his tactical implant no doubt running scenarios. "Victory would be certain, Your Radiance, but resource expenditure would be significant, particularly if facing coordinated resistance rather than conventional military opposition." Define significant. 20 to 30% of fleet capacity dedicated to occupation and suppression. Ongoing resource drain for potentially decades. Reduced ability to respond to challenges in other sectors, which would signal weakness to other tributary species. Yes, Your Radiance. So this is your strategy, not to defeat us, but to make victory so costly that it weakens our empire elsewhere. "We prefer to think of it as making peace more attractive than war," Chen replied. "We're not asking for dominance. We're proposing coexistence. The 17 disputed systems, what if we govern them jointly? Shared resources, shared defense, shared benefit. The Valkyr Empire does not share power. Then the Valkyr Empire has never encountered a partner worth sharing with." The audacity of the statement should have earned immediate execution. But Lucas was watching her with those curious eyes, and somewhere in Thessara's mind, trained for 300 cycles to see every interaction as dominance or submission, a new category began to form. Partnership, mutual benefit, concepts that existed in her language only as weakness. "What would prevent humans from exploiting such an arrangement?" she asked. "What guarantee do we have that sharing power wouldn't simply allow you to build strength until you could challenge us directly? Mutual benefit. Joint governance means we both prosper from the system's resources. Joint defense means we protect each other's interests. Yes, humans would gain access to Valkyr technology, but Valkyr would gain access to human innovation. We have different strengths, different approaches to problems. Together we'd be more formidable than either species alone. Or we could simply take everything and eliminate the future threat. You could try, but I return to the central question, at what cost?" At her advisors, calculating probable outcomes. At the human delegates, nervous but determined. At the caregivers at the far end with the younger children who'd fallen asleep during the discussion. At Lucas, who'd somehow stayed awake and attentive, who now pulled out his data slate and began doodling something while the adults talked. 300 cycles of conquest. 17 tributary species. 4 exterminations. The mathematics of empire written in blood and subjugation. It was the only way she'd ever known. But humans were different. Not because they were stronger, they weren't. Not because they were more advanced, they weren't that either. But because they unified without requiring dominance, because they brought their children to negotiations. Because they spoke of building instead of destroying with genuine conviction, not manipulation. Because a juvenile could touch the scales of the most feared being in 17 systems and ask questions about sensory perception without flinching. "I require time to consider," Thessara said finally. "This session is concluded. You will return to your vessel and await my decision." Chen stood, motioning for his delegation to do likewise. "How long should we wait, Your Radiance?" "Do not attempt to leave the docking bay. If you do, you will be destroyed." "Understood." Lucas hopped off his chair, then remembered protocol and bowed awkwardly, a gesture clearly taught but unpracticed. "Thank you for the food, Your Radiance, and for letting me touch your scales." That was really cool. After the humans departed, Thessara sat alone in the conference chamber for a long time, her 4 hands steepled in contemplation. Vralix stood guard at the door, waiting. "Your thoughts, Captain?" she asked finally. "They are more dangerous than they appear, Your Radiance." "Because of their military capabilities?" "Because of what the juvenile represents." Thessara turned to face him. "Explain Every species we've conquered either submitted immediately or fought individually. We've never faced an enemy that unified so completely that they brought their young into danger rather than leave them safely behind. That speaks to a level of social cohesion we don't fully understand, or desperation. But desperate prey usually runs or freezes. These humans walk into our warship, eat our rations, let their juveniles ask questions about our biology. That's not fear-based behavior. That's... He paused, searching for words. That's the behavior of a species that believes there are equals, despite all evidence suggesting otherwise. Delusion? Or confidence based on factors we haven't identified. Her tail lashed unconsciously, a telltale sign of agitation her subordinates knew to respect. What am I missing, Vralix? I've analyzed their military, their technology, their political structures. By every rational measure, they should be another easy conquest. Yet my instincts scream warning. Perhaps your radiance, the warning isn't about what they are. It's about what we'd become if we destroyed them. Explain. The 4 species we exterminated, they were all potential rivals. Possessing resources or technology or strategic position that threatened our expansion, we eliminated them because conquest is cleaner than coexistence. But humans are offering partnership. If we destroy a species actively seeking peace, if we exterminate them for refusing to submit despite offering cooperation, he paused. What does that make us? Powerful, feared, secure, and perhaps something else. Thesaurus stopped pacing. You're suggesting we've become what we always claimed to fight against. Tyrants rather than rulers, destroyers rather than builders. I suggest nothing, Your Radiance. I merely observe that this decision will define the Valkyr Empire for the next 300 cycles. We can remain what we've always been, or we can become something we've never tried to be. Partners. Yes. Lights moved within its hull, life continuing, unaware of the deliberation happening mere corridors away. Children sleeping. Engineers working, scientists analyzing data. All the mundane activities of a species that somehow believed it could negotiate with annihilation and survive. The mathematics of empire said destroy them. The weight of 300 cycles said assert dominance. Every instinct bred into Valkyr nobility said show no weakness. But one small human juvenile had touched her scales and asked about sensory perception with the innocent curiosity of someone who'd never encountered a threat. And his parents had let him, because they believed talking was braver than fighting. What kind of species taught their young that principle? And what kind of empire would the Valkyr become if they proved that teaching wrong? Thessera reached a decision. Summon the human ambassador, she said, and bring the juvenile Lucas as well. Vralix's surprise was evident in his stillness. Your Radiance? If we're going to reshape 300 cycles of tradition, I want to understand this species completely, and children reveal truths their elders hide. The summons came through less than an hour later. Chen returned with his delegation, and, with visible reluctance from the caregivers, Lucas accompanied them, looking simultaneously excited and nervous. Thessara had dismissed most of her honor guard, leaving only Vralix and 2 others. She'd had the chamber reconfigured to less intimidating parameters, lighting adjusted to neutral, seating arranged for conversation rather than confrontation, even food and water provided. Lucas's eyes went wide when he entered. Whoa. It looks totally different. Sit, juvenile, Thessara said, gesturing to a chair that had been sized appropriately. I have questions for you.
Me? But I'm just a kid?
Shouldn't you ask Ambassador Chen? He knows way more about important stuff. Ambassador Chen knows politics and strategy. You know something more valuable. What's that? Adults filter their words through layers of intention. Children say what they actually think. Lucas looked at Chen, who nodded permission. The boy sat, swinging his legs nervously. Okay, what do you want to know? If I offered peace, true partnership between our species, what would you build? The question clearly surprised everyone, humans and Valkyr alike. Lucas thought about it seriously, his face scrunching in concentration. I'd build a science station, he said finally, like a really big one, with labs for both humans and Valkyr. Because you guys have different biology and see things differently and probably think about problems differently too. My dad says the best science happens when people with different perspectives work together. So I'd want to see what we could discover if we combined human and Valkyr scientists, scientific advancement. And maybe schools too, where human and Valkyr kids could learn together. Not just about science, but about everything. History and art and culture and stuff. Because if kids grow up knowing each other, they probably won't want to fight wars when they're adults. Thessera felt something in her chest, not her primary or secondary heart, but some deeper organ of understanding, shift position. Your species has been spacefaring for barely 2 centuries, she said. Yet you think you can teach the Valkyr anything of value? I don't know if we can teach you stuff, Lucas said honestly, but maybe we can learn stuff together? Like, you've been exploring space way longer than us, so you probably know a lot about things we don't. But we've had to figure out space travel really fast and with limited resources, so maybe we've gotten creative in ways you haven't needed to be. Dad says necessity drives innovation, and Mom says diversity drives discovery. So together we'd have both. Chen was watching Thessera carefully. Lucas expresses it simply, but he's not wrong. Humanity's brief spacefaring history has taught us to solve problems with limited resources. We've developed recycling systems, agricultural techniques, and engineering solutions born from desperation. Your empire has resources we can't imagine. Combining our approaches could advance both our species. Or you could steal our technology and use it against us in a generation, just as you could use the trust we're offering to position your forces for easier conquest. Partnership requires mutual risk. The question is whether mutual benefit outweighs that risk. Economic Minister Threk's analysis of joint development potential. Threx consulted his data slate, his multiple eyes scanning rapidly. Hypothetically, Your Radiance, combining Valkyr resource extraction capabilities with human innovation and efficiency could increase output in the disputed systems by 30 to 40%. Joint governance would reduce administrative overhead and eliminate military expenditure. Over a 50-cycle projection, economic benefit would exceed current tribute from 2 mid-tier tributary species. Military Coordinator Josk, defensive analysis. Zask's expression showed distaste, but his professionalism prevailed. A unified human Valkyr defensive force in the 17 systems would create a buffer zone, protecting our empire's rimward expansion. Humans have demonstrated proficiency in unconventional tactics that could complement our conventional superiority. The strategic value is notable. Intelligence Director Mora, risk assessment. Mora's response was slowest, her hesitation obvious. The primary risk is cultural contamination, Your Radiance. Prolonged contact with human principles of cooperation over dominance could undermine Valkyr hierarchical structures. Secondary risks include technology transfer and potential long-term military parity. However, she paused. Refusing partnership while they've demonstrated willingness to cooperate could inspire other tributary species to question our legitimacy. If word spreads that we destroyed a species actively seeking peace, it could destabilize the tribute system empire-wide. The calculations were clear. Partnership offered benefits, economic, strategic, and political. War offered only the maintenance of current doctrine at substantial cost. But doctrine had built the Valkyr Empire. Strength through dominance, expansion through conquest. 300 cycles of tradition. Thessera looked at Lucas, who was watching her with those curious eyes, waiting for a decision that would determine whether he grew up in peace or war. The child didn't understand the full weight of what was being decided, but he understood enough to be nervous. "Tell me, Juvenile," she said, "what happens if I refuse partnership? If I demand your species submit or be destroyed?" Lucas swallowed hard. Then we fight. "'Cause we can't just let you destroy all the colonies, all those people. Even if we're going to lose, we have to try. Why not save yourselves? Flee beyond our reach and rebuild elsewhere? You can't just abandon millions of people because it's safer for you. That's not how you're supposed to be. Supposed to be according to whom? According to..." Lucas struggled for words, his 8-year-old vocabulary insufficient for the moral philosophy he was trying to express. According to being good. Like, actually good. Not just saying you're good, but actually doing good things even when they're hard. Thessera felt the weight of 300 cycles pressing down on her. Every conquest, every extermination, every species that had submitted or been destroyed. The mathematics of power that had seemed absolute. And now one small human child was suggesting there was a higher mathematics pitch. One that measured goodness rather than strength. "Ambassador Chen," she said, her decision crystallizing, "I will offer terms. Not submission. Partnership. The 17 systems will be governed jointly. Valkyr and human administrators working in cooperation. Resources will be shared equally. Defense will be coordinated. We will establish the scientific and educational institutions your juvenile suggests." The humans went very still. Chen's expression showed hope fighting against disbelief. In exchange, Thessara continued, humanity will share its technological innovations, will coordinate defensive strategy with the Valkyr fleet, and will help us manage the transition of our other tributary species towards similar partnership models. You want to reform the entire empire? Chen asked carefully. I want to build something that lasts more than 300 cycles. Conquest provides temporary stability. Partnership might provide permanent growth. This is experimental. Uncomfortable, but perhaps necessary. Your other tributary species may resist. Then we help them understand, as you've helped me understand, with patience, with demonstration of benefit, with the kind of persistence that brings juveniles to peace negotiations because families should stay together. Lucas was grinning widely. Does this mean we're friends now? Allies, Thessara corrected. Friendship is a more complicated thing that develops over time through shared experience and mutual respect. Like, maybe after we build the science stations and schools and stuff? Thessara found herself making an expression she'd rarely used, a slight upward curl of her lip ridges that was the Valkyr equivalent of a smile. Perhaps juvenile, perhaps eventually. Chin stood, extending his hand in the human gesture of agreement. Thessara gripped it with her smallest hand, feeling the fragility of human bones beneath soft skin, the warmth of their higher metabolism, the slight tremor of emotion carefully controlled. This will require time to implement, she said. Months, perhaps cycles, to restructure administrative systems and establish protocols. Your delegation will remain here during negotiations. We will work together to design a framework both our species can accept. We're prepared to invest whatever time is necessary, Your Radiance. They will remain as well? If it's safe for them, yes. The Parasaur looked at Lucas. I will assign guards to ensure their protection and education about Valkyr culture. In exchange, they will teach us about human culture, beginning with explaining why your species considers salt important enough to ask for at meals. Lucas looked confused. Salt? Why wouldn't you ask for salt if you want it? Because in Valkyr culture, requesting anything, even small things, is seen as displaying need, which displays weakness. But everybody needs stuff. That's just normal. How do you get things you need if you can't ask? We take them, or do without. Lucas processed this, his young face showing the beginning of understanding about cultural differences. That sounds lonely. Like you can't ever let anyone help you because it makes you look weak, but getting help isn't weak. It's how people work together. Your species sees cooperation as strength rather than weakness. One person can't do everything, but a bunch of people working together can do amazing stuff. That's why we have teams and families and communities and all that. Such simple wisdom from such a small creature. Thessara wondered what the Valkyr Empire might have become if they'd learned this lesson 300 cycles ago. How many species might have been partners instead of corpses or subjects? How much they might have built instead of merely conquered. But regret served no purpose. Only the future remained malleable. Then let us work together, she said, addressing the entire human delegation. Let us attempt this experiment in partnership, and let us see what humans and Valkyrie can build when we choose cooperation over conflict. Frameworks were drafted, revised, argued over, and refined. Legal scholars from both species worked to create governance structures that respected both Valkyr hierarchy and human democratic principles.
Military coordinators planned integrated defense strategies. Economic ministers calculated resource distribution formulas.
Scientists proposed joint research initiatives. And through it all, Lucas and the other human children spent time with Valkyr guards and advisors, asking endless questions, sharing their toys and games, slowly building the foundation of understanding that might someday become genuine friendship. Thessara watched them one afternoon in the observation deck, Lucas showing Guard Captain Vralex a holographic game while explaining the rules with patient enthusiasm. Vralex, a warrior who had participated in 17 campaigns and 4 exterminations, listened with careful attention and asked clarifying questions about point scoring. They adapt quickly, Your Radiance, Mora said from beside her. Both species, the children especially. Children haven't learned to fear difference yet. They only see novelty and possibility. And us? What do we see? Below, Lucas finally got Vralex to try the game. The massive warrior manipulated the holographic controls with surprising delicacy, his concentration absolute. When he scored his first point, Lucas cheered, and Vralex's scales rippled in what might have been pleasure. I see the future, Thessara said finally. One where strength is measured not by how many we've conquered, but by how many we've helped prosper, where the Valkyr Empire becomes known for building rather than destroying, where a Valkyr child and a human child can play together and see only another person worth knowing, not an enemy to fear. A revolutionary vision, Your Radiance, or an evolution long overdue. The treaty was signed 6 weeks after the initial negotiation. Representatives from all 17 human governments participated via secure transmission. The Valkyr High Council attended physically, their skepticism evident but contained by Thessara's authority. The document was comprehensive. Joint governance structures, resource-sharing formulas, integrated defense command, scientific cooperation protocols, educational exchange programs, and, at Lucas's insistence, a clause establishing annual cultural festivals where humans and Valkyr could share their art, music, food, and traditions. Ambassador Chen signed first. Thessara signed second, using all 4 of her hands on separate pages to symbolize the totality of commitment. "It's done," Chen said quietly. "No," Thessara corrected. "It's begun. The treaty is simply foundation. The actual work of building partnerships starts now. Are you ready for that work, Your Radiance? I've spent 300 cycles conquering. I suspect I can learn to build." The human vessel prepared to depart 3 days later. Most of the delegation would remain on the Sovereign's Eye to begin implementation work, but families were being rotated back for rest and resupply. Lucas and his family were in the first group. Thessara met them at the docking bay, a courtesy she'd never extended to any tributary species representative. Lucas ran ahead of his parents, stopping just short of collision with her guards. "I have to go now," he said, slightly breathless. "But we're coming back in 2 months. Dad got assigned to the Joint Agricultural Research Team, so I'll get to see the Valkyr homeworld. I will ensure you receive proper education about our culture and history. Oh, and I made you something." He pulled a small object from his pocket, a folded paper shape. "It's called origami. It's a traditional Japanese earth art. This one's a crane. It's supposed to represent peace and good luck." The paper crane sat in his palm, impossibly delicate. Thessara took it carefully with her smallest hand, studying the precise folds that created wings and neck and tail from a single sheet. "Thank you, Lucas." "Oh, and Your Radiance? Can I ask you something?" "You may." "Do you think we'll really be friends someday? Like actual friends, not just allies?" Thessara looked down at the small human who'd helped reshape an empire with simple questions and honest curiosity. She thought about the weeks of negotiation, the treaty now binding their species, the uncertain future they'd chosen together. "I think, Juvenile, that we already are. We simply need time to fully understand what that means." Lucas's smile could have lit a solar system. He threw his arms around one of her legs in a gesture his briefing identified as a hug. Brief enthusiastic, wholly inappropriate by Valkyr standards of physical contact. And Thessara found she didn't mind at all. The human vessel undocked and departed. Thessara watched from the observation deck until it vanished into jump space. Vralik stood beside her, unusually contemplative. "Do you think it will work, Your Radiance, this partnership?" "I think we've chosen something more difficult than conquest. Cooperation requires constant effort, continuous communication, mutual compromise. It will be messy and complicated and frustrating." "Then why choose it?" "Then why choose it?" Thessara held up the paper crane, studying its delicate construction. "Because a juvenile who barely reaches my chest looked at the most feared being in 17 systems and asked to touch my scales. Because his species brought their children into danger rather than abandon principle. Because they spoke of building instead of destroying with genuine conviction. And because they asked for salt," Vralik said, understanding dawning. "Yes, because they asked for salt, because they understood that requesting help isn't weakness, it's how people work together. And perhaps it's time the Valkyr Empire learned that lesson." She carefully placed the paper crane in a protective case, preserving it against damage. A fragile thing, easily destroyed, yet somehow perfect in its simplicity. Like the partnership they were attempting, like peace itself. Outside the viewport, stars wheeled in their ancient patterns. The galaxy that had feared the Valkyr for 300 cycles would now watch something unprecedented. 2 species choosing cooperation over conquest, partnership over domination, building over destroying. It might fail. The weight of tradition, the complexity of integration, the inevitable conflicts of culture and interest, all could tear apart what they were attempting to build. But watching a human child ask about scale biology without fear, eating Valkyr rations without complaint, teaching origami to hardened warriors, Thessara had seen a different kind of strength. Not the strength of weapons or conquest, but the strength of curiosity, adaptation, and genuine desire for understanding. That strength had reshaped her thinking in 6 weeks. Given time, given effort, given commitment from both species, perhaps it could reshape an empire. "Prepare the other tributary species for contact," she ordered. "Begin with those most likely to accept partnership terms. We'll demonstrate the benefits of cooperation, then extend the offer systematically. And those who refuse your radiance?" Thessara considered the question. The old answer would have been simple: subjugation or extermination. But the old answers had built an empire that lasted 300 cycles without growth, without change, without true progress. Then we demonstrate patience. Show them what partnership achieves. Give them time to see their neighbors prosper through cooperation rather than submit through force. And we remember what a human child taught us: that strength isn't about dominating others, but about building something together that neither could achieve alone. She turned from the viewport, her 4 hands gesturing in the formal stance of commitment. "The Valkyr Empire has been feared for 300 cycles. Perhaps it's time we were respected instead. Perhaps it's time we built something worth more than fear." In her quarters later, Thessara placed the paper crane on her desk where she could see it during work. Such a fragile thing to represent such a fundamental shift in philosophy. But then, the most important changes often came from the smallest catalysts. A child asking to touch alien scales. A species bringing families to negotiations. An ambassador speaking of building rather than destroying. A simple request for salt revealing profound differences in how cultures understood strength and weakness. 300 cycles of conquest reshaped by 6 weeks of conversation with beings who should have been prey but chose instead to be partners. The galaxy had feared the Valkyr. Now it would watch what happened when the Valkyr learned to build. And perhaps someday, a Valkyr juvenile and a human juvenile would play together in one of those joint science stations Lucas had imagined, seeing not alien and enemy, but friend and colleague. Perhaps they would create discoveries neither species could achieve alone. Perhaps they would build a future where cooperation was strength and partnership was power. The paper crane sat on her desk, wings spread, symbol of peace and possibility. Thessara looked at it and allowed herself something she rarely felt: hope. Tonight, she would appreciate the simple gift of a child who'd taught an empire a better way to be strong. In the space between stars, the human vessel carried Lucas home. He pressed his face against the viewport, watching the Valkyr warship recede into distance, already planning what he'd learn when he returned. Already imagining the science stations and schools, the discoveries and friendships, all the possibility that partnership could create. His mother ruffled his hair. "You did good, Lucas. You helped make history today." "I just asked questions," he said, and touched her scales. "And gave her the crane. Sometimes that's all it takes. Curiosity instead of fear. Kindness instead of hostility. Being brave enough to see someone different as a person worth knowing." Lucas thought about Queen Thessara. Massive, armored, commanding, terrifying to most of the adults on the ship. But to him, she'd just been someone interesting with answers to questions he wanted to ask. "Do you think we'll really be friends?" he asked his mother. "I think you already are, sweetie. You just need time to understand it." Outside the viewport, stars wheeled in ancient patterns. 2 species that should have gone to war had chosen partnership instead. An empire built on conquest had turned toward cooperation, and it had all started because a child asked for salt and nobody told him it was weakness. The galaxy was vast and full of species, conflicts, and possibilities. But tonight, on one small human vessel traveling through the dark, and in one massive Valkyr warship holding position among the stars, people of 2 different worlds looked at the same space and saw the same hopeful future, where strength meant working together, where asking for help was wisdom, not weakness, where a Valkyr queen and a human child could become friends because someone chose conversation over conquest. The paper crane sat on Thessara's desk, fragile and perfect, symbol of everything they were trying to build. It would be difficult. It would require patience, compromise, and constant effort. But it would be worth it. Because that's what the humans had taught her. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose to build something together, even when destroying each other would be easier. Now it would learn to be something better. And it had all started when an alien queen watched a human child ask for salt.